The following was recorded in front of a live studio audience at the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe. This is the United Podcast Network.
The following program is closed captioned for the thinking impaired.
By tomorrow, I will rule the world!
You think he's gone? He's not gone. That's the whole point. He's never gone.
Is this some radical new therapy?
You see?
Well, I must have not been paying attention when you were just talking to me. Do you think that you could repeat the question?
Normally I'm going crazy at this point trying to get it up on Facebook and everything, but since we're taping in advance, I don't know what to do with myself.
Yeah, you don't have to worry about it today. It's so hot out. I was about to ask you, does the music sound like it's dragging? Like even Mel's too hot.
Even Siri was doing that on me today.
Yeah.
I know. I'm going to hate to ask you to do this. Can you bump me up a little bit? I'm sorry.
How's that?
All right. Sounds better. All right, why don't we get this show on the road, shall we?
Sure.
Hi, how you guys doing? My name's Tom Duggan here at the Paying Attention Podcast. Hi atop Two Guys Smoke Shop at the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe. We got a great guest with us today. We're going to get to her in a second. Before we do, though, normally I do about 10 minutes of news. We're not going to do that today. I just have one thing that I really want to talk about. I'm so incensed at Fox News. I normally don't watch Fox News. I usually watch CNN, even though I'm a right-winger, because you got to know what the other side is saying. You have to know what the propaganda from the Democrats, what they're saying. And I hate CNN because they lie, and then they lie about lying, and then they lie about the lie that they lied about. And every once in a while, I do watch Tucker, but every once in a while I'll watch something else on Fox. And the last couple of days I've been flipping over to Fox because all CNN can talk about is January 6th of a year and a half ago. And I just wanted something different. And I heard 5 different people on Fox News over the last couple of days say that Joe Biden called Latinos tacos. And I'm so tired of that lie. I'm so tired of both sides lying about this kind of stuff. And she never called Latinos. Listen, she's racist, but not because she called Latinos tacos, because she didn't call Latinos tacos. She made a comparison. She made a comparison of the uniqueness of the breakfast tacos in that area where she was. She didn't say Latinos are tacos. And as much as I want Latinos to never vote for a Democrat, I just can't sit here and let Fox News do what CNN does, because then we become them. And I will be dipped in, excuse my French, I will be dipped in shit if I'm going to sit there and I'm going to cheer on Fox News doing what CNN does, which is lying. And I just can't stand it. If you don't believe me, go on Facebook, go on YouTube, look up Joe Biden's speech. What makes her a racist is not that she called Latinos tacos, because she didn't. What makes her racist is that she uses the phrase Latinx, which is the degendering of the Latino language and culture. And let me tell you, as somebody who grew up in Lawrence and spends more time in Lawrence than I do North Andover, Latinos are furious about that. They're furious about white liberals telling them they need to degender their language because the Democrat Party has this obsession with gender. They have this obsession with gender fluidity and wiping out any kind of gender norms. And it's absolutely racist for white liberals to tell Latinos what they should be calling themselves. So I just want to start off with that because it's been driving me crazy. And a lot of conservatives, when I posted this on Facebook, came on and said, yeah, and then they put her exact quote, as if somehow that means she called them tacos, and she didn't. It's no different than when CNN said that Donald Trump called all Mexicans rapists. He didn't call all Mexicans rapists, any more than Joe Biden called all Latinos tacos. And if both sides could just stop friggin' lying about this kind of stuff, those of us who consume the news, those of us who really need information about what's going on in our government, would actually have some real information that we could be making decisions on, not this emotional manipulation that both sides are doing. I'm so disappointed in Fox, although I've been disappointed in them for a long time anyway. I'm not a big fan of Fox, although I do love Tucker. He's the only guy on that station I like to watch. In the studio with me, Leah Cole Allen. I almost said it backwards. I almost said Leah Allen Cole because it's easier to say. Now, she's running for lieutenant governor for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. She's running with her running mate. We're going to talk about this in a couple of seconds because it just drives me crazy that gubernatorial candidates are now choosing their running mates. It never used to be that way, at least not when I was younger. And I don't like it the way that it is, so we'll chat about that. But before we do, I want her to introduce herself. Tell people who you are. I know you were a state rep at one point. Talk a little bit about your background. Mm-hmm. And then we'll talk about what a lieutenant governor does.
Okay.
All right. Well, thanks. It's so nice to be here. Appreciate you having me on. Yes, my name is Leah Allen. I am a wife. I'm a mother of 2 small kids. I'm a registered nurse.
And they're adorable.
And they
I saw
are
them at the
adorable.
Hispanic Week Festival, Father's Day Parade.
Yes.
Absolutely gorgeous.
They are the best. They're really troopers. They're only almost 3 and 9 months old, but we bring them to a lot of things, and they're really well behaved. So I
And I
love
bet they
them.
get you votes.
I hope so.
Everybody loves babies and puppies.
Yeah, right. So, yes, I was also, as you mentioned, a state representative. I think when I ran back in 2013, you were one of the first people that interviewed me. I came to your office, and I ran back then because I was working in a nursing home. I was a nurse working at a nursing home, and I was doing 16-hour shifts. I was working overnights. I was trying to pay back my student loans, pay off my car, and then Governor Deval Patrick decided that he wanted to raise taxes by $8 billion in the Commonwealth, when there was reports coming out all the time of all these different state agencies just losing money, not accounting for it. They were sending out checks to people that didn't exist. They didn't know what was going on. And I thought to myself, we cannot raise taxes until we figure out where all the money that we already have is going. And I jumped into an open seat. It was a special election in Peabody. I won in a blue district as a Republican, and then I went on to win re-election before I left politics to go back to nursing. And when I left, I didn't really think I would ever get back into politics, but
We were hoping that you would. I was heartbroken when I found out you were leaving.
I know, yeah. I know, and it was like, for a while, I was just living as a private citizen. I got married, I started my family, I was working at a hospital, and it was kind of like, yeah, it wasn't aggravating that we have high taxes in Massachusetts and that there was corruption at the State House, but it was like you could kind of live your life. But then the pandemic happened, and suddenly the government was right into your life, and they were making all these decisions whether or not your business was essential. I mean, if it's feeding your family, it's essential to you.
Absolutely.
Right? Then they were closing small businesses. They were letting the big box stores stay open. They were having all these kind of arbitrary mandates, like a curfew. I mean, come on. I was driving me nuts that nobody in a position of power was using any kind of critical thinking to be like, maybe none of these measures are working. One-way aisles in the supermarket.
Right.
I mean, just all.
Remember that was going to save your life if you went one-way aisles in this? Come on.
For God's sakes, it was like, where did everybody's common sense go?
Right.
And then, of course, the vaccine mandates. And I, as a nurse, one of the main tenets of one of the cornerstones of medical ethics is the right to bodily autonomy and the right to refuse medical treatment. And then the government comes in and puts these mandates in, saying that if you don't take this COVID shot, then you lose your job. And I was pregnant during the pandemic. I worked on a COVID floor. I worked treating hospitalized COVID patients, and I didn't want to take the vaccine. I was pregnant when the mandates went into effect. When I came back from maternity leave, I was still nursing. I'm still nursing my son. He's only 9 months old, and the safety data is just not there. It's just not there for pregnancy and breastfeeding, and due to, I mean, this is a federal mandate. It's tied to payment reimbursement through Medicare, but all hospital workers had to be vaccinated. And when I chose not to take the vaccine for myself, I already had COVID, so I do have natural immunity. I was let go from my job.
Wow.
Yeah, so...
You know, that's so infuriating because a year and a half earlier, everyone in power and everyone in the country was looking at people like you as heroes, right? We were calling you heroes during the pandemic, when there was no vaccine, when you guys were going into work, when we had no idea what the real threat was, you guys were taking the ultimate risk working with COVID patients, and you were heroes. But then when you didn't do what the government told you to do, you were, I was going to use a swear word, but I know she's trying to get elected, so I'm trying to hold it back. But you guys were zeros. You went from heroes to zeros just because you wouldn't do what the government told you to do.
Exactly.
And that was really infuriating. What was really infuriating for me is, like you said, it seemed like our local mayors, our local city councilors, the people who are supposed to be like the backstop for us, they're supposed to be like the last line of defense for our rights. They all threw their hands up and just did what they were told.
Yeah.
We had the mayor of Methuen was literally, the guy's like in his 70s, was literally chasing kids in ball fields who were playing catch one-on-one that they were like 90 feet apart.
Yeah.
And was running out and telling them, no, you can't play in this ball field.
Right.
You had mayors like the mayor of Lawrence telling people they couldn't have backyard barbecues. And it was like, well, when did we suspend the Constitution? When did that happen?
Exactly.
I missed that part.
Yeah. No, you're totally right. And that was part of the craziness that I saw happening. It was like, yeah, exactly. Like everybody was so willing to suspend their rights because they were so fearful. And then, I mean, I will give them the first 2 weeks to slow the spread. That was supposed to be the 2 weeks. Nobody knew what was happening then. I could even go along with that. But then the data started changing. New things started coming out. We learned who was most at risk. We learned that it wasn't, living on your groceries. You didn't have to bleach your groceries when you got home and stuff like that. And it just seemed like it was more about control than it was keeping anybody safe.
Well, look at out in California. There was a guy that was on a paddleboard in the ocean by himself.
Yep.
And they sent the Coast Guard to go arrest the guy.
Exactly.
And it was like, at some point, I guess what bothered me the most was how many people that weren't in power just agreed to comply.
Yeah.
And I hate to make Nazi comparisons, but I'm really well read up on World War II. And it seemed like as the Nazis were coming to power in Germany, before like they started, putting ovens together and stuff, they were systematically taking rights away from people who were Jewish little by little. If you were Catholic, if you were Jewish, if you were gay, and people just complied. People turned in their neighbors. And when all of this started happening, I thought, I always thought that this could never happen here. But look at this. You have people, diming out their neighbors. He's having a birthday party next door. Look at Karen Polito. Unfortunately, I had to break that story because she was the one out there telling people they couldn't do it. And then she went and she did it.
Yep.
But it was so infuriating that so many Americans who should know better didn't listen to that little voice inside of them that said, you know what, there's something wrong about this.
Yeah.
Now, I came on here like the first week. As they were shut down, I continued doing my show. And I kept saying it was bullshit. And you should have seen the hate mail that I got. I'm killing people.
Yeah.
I'm advocating people's deaths.
Yep.
Because people were so scared by our government. They were scared by the government. I mean, had the government just kind of stayed out of it and done what they were supposed to do, I think we would have had the exact same result, only with less deaths.
Right, and clearly none of those measures were really very effective because we had one of the worst COVID death rates and hospitalizations in the country.
Right.
I mean, thank God DeSantis down in Florida had taken a different route because we have something to compare it to.
Right.
Because all the other states seem to just be going along with the lockdowns and everything, and it was clear that it wasn't effective, and it's a little nerve-wracking right now because you hear a lot of Democrats running for office now are talking about maybe it's time to bring back the mask mandates.
They're saber-rattling again.
Yep. So it's like at some point we need to learn to just live with COVID. It's here. It's becoming an endemic now. And we don't do this for anything else. We don't do this for the flu. We don't do this for any other communicable disease, where the flu is actually more dangerous to children anyway. And it's just like at some point we have to stand up and say, no, we're done with this.
So now you're running as the running mate of Jeff Deal. Are you okay with, in general, right? Because I know that you're in this position now, right? But are you okay with people running for governor picking their own running mate? Because prior to like I'm guessing like maybe 96, 97, prior to that, the convention picked who the governor was going to be and who the lieutenant governor was going to be, or the voters on the ballot got to vote. People weren't running as a team.
Yeah.
And then Paul Cellucci came in and he changed everything. And he said, no, it was Bill Weld came in and said, I'm going to have Paul Cellucci as my running mate. And I was really offended by that. I'm like, if I want to vote for you, but I don't want to vote for him, who are you to tell me he's got to be the guy?
Yeah.
And I like both of them, but I just didn't like being told what to do. What do you think about that?
Yeah, so
Shouldn't the voters have more control? I just think the voters should have more control.
I think it's a great point. So, for instance, like in the primary, we do have a primary, and it could be that one of us gets knocked off and we have to run with the other guy. It's not.
So even though he picked you as his running mate, if Jeff wins the primary, and the lieutenant governor candidate for Chris Doty wins the primary, you're out.
Yeah.
Or vice versa, she's out, right?
Yep.
Oh, I didn't know that. All right, so I feel a little bit better.
About that, yeah. But I think also maybe as Republicans in Massachusetts, it's helpful to have kind of two campaigns supporting the same person because then you can almost double your campaigning area. So when you go and say I'll say I'm supporting Jeff Deal for governor, the people that I'm talking to, while Jeff's on another part of the state, they're listening to our message and kind of saying, okay, I like what they both stand for. So it kind of, I think, in a way, covers more ground.
So most people in fact, not only most people even in politics don't know what a lieutenant governor does.
Yeah.
Explain to people what the role of the lieutenant governor is other than laying in wait in case the governor has to leave.
Yeah. So the constitutional role of the lieutenant governor is actually very small. I would chair the governor's council, which is actually
super important.
Yes, super important.
Because the governor's council
choose the judges.
Right.
And,
they confirm judges and, more importantly, the parole board.
Yes. Yeah. So right now there are no Republicans on the governor's council. So that's a hugely important one to have, I think, another point of view on there to question these candidates that are being appointed to these positions and things like that. And that's mainly, as well as, I mean, different lieutenant governors have taken on different roles as far as being kind of a liaison to the different municipalities and things like that. And I would obviously be interested in doing that as well, but definitely trying to bring some law and order type of appointees to, like you said, the parole board and the judges.
I'm still furious about the fact that Dominic Sinelli, 10 years ago, was in on 3 life sentences by a Dukakis judge, and the parole board let him out, and 2 nights later, he murdered a Woburn police officer.
Yeah.
And I went back and I read everything that I could on that case, including the parole reports and everything. I did public information. I got all of it. I wrote a series of stories on it. I'm still 10 years later infuriated that you have parole board members who think that if a hardened killer, if an evil person who's done horrible things gets his GED and joins Toastmasters and learns how to speak publicly, that he's ready to re-enter society. These people should never have power. None of these people should ever have power anywhere.
Yeah.
I'm still infuriated by all of that.
It was terrible. It was.
So if you become the lieutenant governor, if Jeff Deal wins and you become the lieutenant governor, what would you like to take on? What is it that you'd like to do for the state? Because you're kind of like the Kamala Harris on the state level. You can kind of do what you want, right? Or whatever the governor maybe tasks you with, maybe puts together some kind of a task force for something, whatever. You can do that. What would you like to be doing?
So one of my biggest issues is medical freedom. I think that I saw a sign one time, at the Dorchester Day Parade, there was a group kind of protesting Mayor Wu for all her vaccine mandates and stuff, and they had a sign that said, medical freedom is the new civil rights movement. And I tend to kind of agree with that because like what happened after the pandemic with people needing to show their papers, like Kim Driscoll's running for lieutenant governor on the Democrat side. She was one of the only cities in Massachusetts to implement a vaccine passport. And it's a little bit terrifying to me that somebody with that kind of mentality would want to run for a statewide position, because obviously that tells me everything I need to know about how she would govern, and it wouldn't be the will of the people. It would be imposing her will on the people.
She's an outright communist.
Yeah.
And I can say that because I'm related to her, and as a human being, I think she's a wonderful person.
Yes.
However, her politics, she's an outright communist. Right. She thinks that single-family zoning is racist.
Right.
Like, I mean, everything is racism, global warming, and transformative this and transformative LGBTQ : semicolon.
Right. Exactly.
Are you gonna pander when you get in? Are you gonna pander to these groups that because Charlie Baker certainly has, and I love Charlie. I'm probably the only guy left that still likes him. But he has, and Karen certainly has, and most of the Republicans. In the state house,
they're a little afraid of.
They're all pandering, and they're all afraid.
Yep.
And I want someone that's not going to pander. I mean, you don't have to be Donald Trump and shove it up.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I think the fear there is that the woke mob on those issues, they are brutal. They are so hostile. But I think for me, I truly in my heart believe that everybody deserves respect. Everybody deserves to be treated with kindness. And I think if you actually really believe that, you don't have to pander, because you're not looking to disrespect anybody, but you also don't think that they should run the whole show. Like they deserve human rights like anybody else, but they're not more important or less important than anybody. So I'm not sure why there's such this focus on making everything kind of revolve around their issues. I mean, if you want to be treated like everybody else, then, just live your life. Right. That's kind of how
it went from tolerance, you had to tolerate the people who are different from you, to you have to accept what they do And then it
And then
became.
you have to agree
now
with
you have to
it.
celebrate what.
Yeah,
if
you
you don't
celebrate it,
celebrate
exactly.
what they're
Yeah.
doing, and it's like, listen, I've never heard of anybody wanting a bondage parade. Why do we have LBGTQ parades? Why? I mean, I've never heard anybody wanting a foot fetish parade if that's what they're into. So why do we have to have all of this celebration of all of these things when really what we should be doing is assimilating
Yeah.
and treating everybody the same regardless of what their
That's
differences are.
exactly. That's exactly how I feel about it. If they want to have parades, go for it, but don't. It's just
Behave yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
And it's the same thing. If you don't celebrate what they're doing, they actively seek you out and try to destroy you
Right.
until you kind of like bend your knee to what they're doing. Just
Right.
do whatever you want. You know, like I want to protect the rights of everybody.
Right.
You know,
and I'm okay with whatever someone wants to do, whatever their sexual preference is, whatever they. I really, honestly, couldn't care less. What I do object to is shoving it down people's throats, and especially shoving it down kids' throats in our public schools.
Yep, and that was my second point that I wanted to get to. Was my kids are too young for school right now, but that's a huge issue, and that's what I'm actually meeting with a parents group after this, who is concerned about that. Parents are really concerned that a lot of sexualization, a lot of gender issues, a lot of just these really age inappropriate things are being pushed on their kids in school. And that's going to be a huge thing that we're going to take on because it's happening everywhere. I remember I was talking to my husband about it probably 6 months ago.
She had to bring the husband up.
And he's like...
She had to bring the husband up.
And God bless him, but he's like, I think it's isolated. It's not happening everywhere. I'm like, nope, it is happening everywhere. Yeah. And it's definitely a big issue. That
if it's happening in Lawrence,
yeah.
It's happening everywhere because Lawrence, Latino population, 90% of Lawrence, it's 97% or somewhere in that neighborhood of Latino kids going to Lawrence public schools, and Latinos are not for this garbage.
Right, no.
And it's in the Lawrence schools because parents are calling me on a regular basis.
Yes, exactly. And that's what they try to make you think. They try to kind of frame it in a way like, oh, it's not happening. What do you mean critical race theory? What do you mean gender, fluidity, whatever they're doing? Right. And they try to make it seem like it's not happening. And then it's kind of woven into the curriculum in a way where it is difficult to point to it's happening right here because it's not one lesson plan that it's covering. It's kind of woven into everything.
Plus, they lie so much. First, they say it's not happening. Then when you prove it is happening, they diminish it and say, yeah, but it's no big deal.
Yeah.
Then when they find out it is a big deal, they say, yeah, but that's an isolated incident. Like, they always keep moving the goalpost. They always keep pushing the line, pushing the line, pushing the line. Instead of just saying, this is why I like Republicans more than I like Democrats. Republicans generally just tell you what they really think. Democrats never really tell you what they think. They always tell you it's not something when it is.
Yeah.
They always tell you they're not trying to do something when they are. And I just can't stand the dishonesty. I just can't. I know that your running mate, Jeff, is pro-life. Are you pro-life?
I'm pro-life.
Okay. So you guys are the only pro-life candidates that I know, period. I had one friend who's a state representative in Lawrence, I'm not going to mention his name, who's been pro-life forever, and because of the pressure that he's getting, they primaried him this year. And because of the pressure that he's getting, he just sponsored an abortion bill. And I called him up and I yelled at him.
Yeah.
I'm like, listen, I know you don't believe in this stuff. He said, Tom, if I'm not here to do good things, if I get voted out because of this one issue, I'm not here to do good things. And I'm like, yeah, but you know what? Grow a set of balls. Like, seriously, go out there and promote what you truly believe because your voters are with you.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what the Boston Globe says. The people of Lawrence, Latinos, they're not for this abortion stuff. They're not for transgender bathrooms. They're not for gay marriage. They're not for all this other stuff. That's what they're called. And they're certainly not for Latinx. First time, anytime I hear somebody use the phrase Latinx, I'm out. I'm just done.
I know. So, no, yeah, definitely. And I think, honestly, though, when it comes to the abortion issue, I don't agree with the law here. I think that it goes way too far. And I think even Charlie Baker had an issue with how far the law goes, where it's kind of vague. They left it vague on purpose. And also, the age of consent was lowered to like 16. I mean, when you're 16, you're not making...
Why don't you just make it 5?
Yeah, you're not
You know
making
what I mean, at that
good
point.
decisions for yourself when you're 16.
Right.
You still need your parents to weigh in on things with you. And as a mother, that.
How do you
is
guys
too much.
plan on winning in a state where a vast majority of Massachusetts voters are for abortion? I mean, rabidly for. They're not just kind of okay with it. They're rabidly for abortion.
Yeah, that's the whole thing. So I don't have to explain this to you, but just as part of my kind of spiel here. So Roe v. Wade getting overturned returned the power to the states. The state legislature right now voted for abortion. That was them representing the people of Massachusetts. I don't necessarily think that just changing the laws is going to change anything. This is like a societal problem. We need to change hearts and minds on this issue. We need to make people believe that life is something to be celebrated again and not like a hindrance to your career and an inconvenience and things like that. And I think that I don't have all the answers. I don't know how exactly we're going to do that, but like just outlawing abortion is not going to change anybody's mind. You know, mandating the vaccine didn't make me want to get it.
Right,
So
right.
I think that as a society, we have to ask ourselves why it went from safe, rare, and legal to on demand and without exception,
Right.
or without apology or something like that.
I always say the Democrats are for abortion on demand up to third grade.
Yeah.
Because if you let them go to third grade, they would.
It would. As long as that child is dependent on you at all, some people will
Right.
say, well, you know, it's your life, whatever. And so I think that we need to ask ourselves, like I said, as a society, when did it change from safe, legal, and rare to on demand and without apology? I think that is something as a culture that is wrong with us.
Would you guys favor cutting state funding for abortion? Because if they want to go have an abortion and they're not using my state tax dollars, not that I'm okay with the abortion,
Right.
but if you're going to do it, don't use my money.
I think a lot of people feel like that. A lot of people would say, just don't use my tax dollars for it. And I think people are entitled to feel that way.
So let's get back to my original question. So given that Massachusetts is vastly pro-abortion, they're not just pro-choice, they're really pro-abortion. How do you guys plan on winning? Now it's such like if this was a year ago before Roe v. Wade was overturned, it wouldn't really be much of an issue. But now it is.
Yeah. You know, we're not running on outlawing abortion. I think we're focused on things that are like really matter to people right now. And I know abortion matters a lot to some people, but right now we're really focused on our inflation, our taxes. The state is awash in excess revenue, and instead of making meaningful tax cuts that will really help people, help our seniors, help our working families, they want to give a $250 one-time rebate to people. That's less than people's weekly grocery bill. You know what I mean?
But I'll take the $250.
Yeah. And then, but I had some senior citizens up in Gloucester ask me, how come people making less than $38,000 aren't included? And I guess those people weren't included, and I can't answer that. I don't know how they decided those cutoff numbers or whatever. But what we need is really, I think, some meaningful savings for people that will help put more money in their pocket so that they can better afford gas that's at record high prices right now, and better afford their groceries. I think people are really worried that they're going to bring back the masks for the kids in school.
They will. If they can, they will.
If they can, they will,
Yeah.
exactly. And I think people just want to move on. They want to have some sense of normalcy back in their lives. And, you know, the Democrats are just going ahead with all of this totally ideologically driven stuff. And we're talking about things that are going to help people. You know, we want to have an education commissioner that's going to listen to parents and listen to their concerns about the curriculum and go back to these school committees and tell them you can't turn off a parent's microphone who's asking you a question because you don't like it, stuff like that. So what I'm hoping is that enough people are concerned about the issues that are really facing them, that's really making life difficult, and they want to see it get better for them more than this one issue. Although I know the Democrats are going to pound that issue to try to get their voters out to the polls. But I think that's all they have right now, because the rest of the Democrat agenda is a disaster.
Yeah. You were a state representative when I filed my bill to change the state's public records law, when I rewrote the bill. And you sat on the committee that heard, I think 2 different committees that heard the bill. And you were always very supportive of making the state's public records law. At the time, the state's public records law says you have to turn over records within 10 days, but there was no or else.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of laws in Massachusetts I'm now finding, since we've done that, since we've changed that law, I'm now finding there's a lot of laws in Massachusetts where it says you have to do this, but there's no or else. There's no penalty to it. What I'd like to see is the next governor, whoever it is, go through some of the laws that we have, rather than trying to make new laws. Everybody wants to make new laws, and then they can put it on their resume. I want to see them go through laws and either get rid of laws that are old and outdated, or start to change some of the laws and add teeth to those laws where there's no enforcement provision. Like when I had a judge look at me after our 3rd time in court say, Mr. Duggan, I'd love to make the mayor give you the documents, but there's nothing in the law that says I can hold him in contempt. There's nothing in the law that says I can fine him. And then I started looking at a whole bunch of other stuff and finding the same thing. I'd like to see that.
Yeah.
I'd like to see governor, lieutenant governor start looking at those kind of things.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds like something that needs to be addressed. We want to bring transparency and accountability to state government, and I think that's a great point. That's somewhere to start.
I think you could have a great role if Jeff wins as his point person for homelessness. Now, homelessness and the opioid addiction issues are the two most important issues facing every single family in Massachusetts. I would even maybe say the country. And yet there is literally nobody at the state or federal level that's doing anything to tackle this in any meaningless way. And maybe if Jeff wins, he can task you to be like his homeless czar or something. But I want to see people at the top start to look at the opioid crisis and start looking at the homelessness crisis and do something meaningful. Do you guys have a plan? I think that's a no. We have a no on that. I mean, that's okay. You don't have to have a plan.
Yeah, I mean, we don't have
now.
all the answers yet, but
Right.
definitely tackling that is a huge issue. It's on the radar, and it's something that we, are for sure interested in doing. We don't have a plan.
A set plan.
Yeah.
What's the state overage? I'm trying to think of the word.
Oh, like the excess revenue?
Yes. What's the excess revenue?
I've heard a couple different. Last I heard, it was like a solid $2 billion.
That's a lot of money.
That's a lot of money. And
you can help
do
a lot of homeless veterans with that money.
You absolutely could.
You could give treatment to a lot of heroin addicts with that money.
Yeah. So right, the revenue is there. It's just.
Or you could just give it back to people. Like businesses. People that are struggling.
Yeah, I mean, Tom, when I was this is one of the things that drove me absolutely nuts when I was a state representative. When we were debating different bills, cutting taxes or whatever, all of the Democrats that got up and said how much money the state would lose out on, it infuriated me that they feel so entitled to that money.
Well, they think it's their money.
They think it's their money.
Right.
I think I got up at one point and said, we have to remember that this is the taxpayers' money. This is the money that belongs to the business owners, to the working people of Massachusetts. We can't talk about it like it's our money. It's not.
Right.
And so
because the state can always do things like cut spending. Right? Like you have the entire Department of Education. How much money do they spend in the entire Department of Education for the state? If you literally did away with the State Department of Education tomorrow, the only people who would notice would be the people who lose their jobs. Nobody else would even notice. If you took that money, gave it back to each city and town, and gave each city and town control of their school system.
Yes.
You'd have better educated kids.
Absolutely.
You'd have teachers unions that would have to actually do their jobs, and everybody would benefit, I think.
I think you're absolutely right. The more you decentralize money and power and let it happen on more of the local level, I think everybody's better off.
How do you guys beat Chris Doty? He's got more money than God. He's campaigning very hard. He's been up in the Merrimack Valley an awful lot. How do you beat him for? I mean, you have to get past Martha Coakley in November. I keep saying Martha Coakley, and I know that's wrong. It's Maura Healey, but they're really the same person. They're really the same person, right? Because she's gonna. I think the Republicans actually have a shot at beating her because she's campaigning like Martha Coakley.
Yeah.
She's really not doing a lot of work.
Campaigning from the base.
She thinks she's already been coronated.
Yeah. So I think after the pandemic, we're looking at a little bit of a different Massachusetts. And there are people that are angry with what happened. There are people that don't want to see it happen again. People that lost their small businesses. They lost their jobs over the mandates. They felt like they had to be coerced into taking a vaccine they didn't really want. They're worried about their kids in school, what their kids are learning. We're pounding the pavement all the time talking about this stuff. People are contacting us, talking about, come to this event, we're getting people together. It's a huge movement in Massachusetts, and a lot of these people are paying attention to politics for the very first time. And I just think that kind of a milquetoast approach to the issues right now is not what's going to get people out to the polls. I think that in what we're facing as a state right now, we need someone who's going to really push back on things, and not saying that we don't have to work with the Democrats. Of course we do. But there are issues that we really need to stand up against, and I just don't see that message coming from the other campaign.
Do you think Charlie Baker did a good job? He's on his way out. He's kind of coasting now. But he's been in there for what, 8, 9, 10 years maybe?
8 years.
Do you think he did a good job?
All together?
Yeah, like overall.
I mean, I didn't notice really a huge change in Massachusetts one way or the other. And I mean, granted, there's only so much one person can do from the corner office, but I definitely think that as far as the pandemic goes, I would have liked to see our rights been fought for a little harder. And I wonder what happened with the flip-flop when he said he wasn't going to play that game where you'd have to get the shot or you'd lose your job. And then it seemed like right after that, along came the executive orders. So
Yeah, that was... I've always defended him on just about everything.
Yeah.
Until he started that. And then when they blamed Francisco Urena for the deaths in the Holyoke Old Soldiers Home.
Yeah, no, Francisco's
now,
great.
I mean, and we did a whole show on it. And I'm still pissed off about it because he still doesn't have his good name back. I'm hoping that you guys, if you guys get elected, that you're going to make Francisco whole. That you're going to make him whole, that you're going to do something for him, and you're going to make it right. And I think he deserves a public apology from the state. This guy's a hero Marine, Purple Heart. He got blamed for the deaths of. I mean, you can accuse a Marine of a lot of things, but to take away their honor, the way they took away his honor, that's the worst thing you can do to somebody who's a Marine. And I'd like to see you guys do that. Is there anything? We got about 5 minutes left. Is there anything that you want to impart upon people? As to why they should vote for the Deal Allen ticket.
Yes. So, of course, Jeff and I are fiscally conservative. We have the track record of standing up, fighting for the taxpayers at the State House, fighting for different reforms of state government to save the taxpayers' money, things like that. And, you know, I think on top of that, we need people in office who are critical thinkers, who are going to think about policies critically. Like, for instance, I think we have to be very careful about all of this green policy kind of legislation that they're pushing through. There's not a lot of long-term thought going into this. Like, the Senate, I think, passed a bill to require every car in Massachusetts sold by 2030 be an electric vehicle. And they're not even thinking that we don't have the grid to power all these vehicles. I mean, it's just so short-sighted in their like frantic quest to get off of fossil fuels completely. And of course, we all want to protect the environment and all that stuff. But I think we need to think critically about what is actually going to help the environment, what's going to enrich lobbyists, and what's going to just impart more government control without any real benefit to the environment or the people of Massachusetts. I think
And electric cars, by the way, don't help the environment at all.
They don't. The emissions that it takes to make them and the batteries and what you get in the return on investment, it's actually, they pollute more than just a regular car. And the battery is not, we don't know what to do with them when they're done. Right. You know, they're kind of toxic.
Yeah, they'll be in landfills, like all these solar panel landfills
not to
that we're now
mention
starting
the
to see.
mining that goes into it. Just, I mean, I could go on. The other thing is, like I mentioned, the medical freedom. The first thing that I want to get rid of is that $500,000 vaccine passport program that the state rolled out. I think that we need to keep an eye on that, because vaccine passports, I don't believe, are to keep anybody safe. I think it's a way to, control people.
It's all control.
Yeah, and we just really need somebody in the state who is going to bring up these issues, because right now it seems like a lot of elected officials, they just go along with whatever comes out from the CDC or whatever, and they're not thinking critically about this. And we need people who are going to question the narrative to make sure that it's actually what it seems to be, and that people's rights and freedoms are always protected.
Any last words?
Thank you for having me on. This was great.
Love having you.
And
she's so adorable. She's just as adorable as she was when I first met her. And you actually, but people at home may not know, you actually sat through one of my lectures. I forced her to sit through one of my lectures. She came to my office, and I'm like, before I talk to you, you have to watch this. Because I did a whole thing on how the media is going to treat you when you get elected.
Yeah.
And I hope that even though I forced you to sit through it, I hope that when you became a state rep, some of that sunk in. Because, boy, I watched the way they treated you afterwards, and I'm like, man, that's exactly what I told them was going to happen.
Oh, yeah.
You know? Yep. So anybody who sat through any of my lectures, even by force, is okay with me.
Well, thank you. Could I plug my website?
Absolutely,
really
please do. And Jeff's and whoever else.
Yeah, so my website is leahcoleallen.com, and Jeff's website, jeffdeal.com. You can go on there. You can find out more about where we stand on the issues. There's a contact page. There's a donation page.
Does it say Republican on your page? Because that's my big pet peeve. I go to people's candidate pages to see, because if they're especially at the national and state level, if they're a Democrat, I may not want to vote for them.
Yeah.
And I go and I look and I see there was a guy the other day, and I looked and I went to all the links and everything. And it didn't tell me what party he was. And I had to try and figure it out from his issues. Like, if they use the word transformative, they're a Democrat, right? Yeah. If they use any of those catchwords. But it's very tough. So I hope that you guys have Republican on your website. And if you don't, I hope that you will add
Look
it.
at that. I'm not even
Because there's a lot of people out there like me who, before we want to know anything else about you, we want to know what party you are.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, no, good point. I don't know. I have to look. I didn't do my own website.
Okay.
But yeah, no, definitely. But I appreciate you having me on. I really do.
Leah Cole Allen. Is it just Leah Allen now?
So it's Leah Cole Allen unofficially. It's not my legal name. Cole is totally gone because I got married and changed my name. We left it in there for a little bit of name recognition, but I believe on the ballot it's just Leah Allen.
Leah Allen.
Because that's my legal name.
Leah Allen, she's a candidate for lieutenant governor as a Republican. So if you're voting in the Republican primary, which I am not, I'm voting in the Democrat primary because I'm an independent now, and I like to cause trouble on the other side. I vote for all the most conservative Democrats that I can, and I always like to vote for Diana DeZoglia because she's our local girl. But Leah Allen is she's running for lieutenant governor in Massachusetts as a Republican. You can vote for her pulling a Republican ballot. She's running hand in hand with Jeff Deal, who's running for governor, and we appreciate you being here. Hopefully, maybe you can come back. If you win, we definitely want you to come back.
Yes.
And
It
we
says
should.
Republican.
What did I say?
No, I said it says Republican.
On the website. Well, good.
nice.
Well, you get 10 extra points and a star on your forehead for that.
Thank you.
Because most of them don't. Well,
Also, if I may, just
Yeah,
really
sure.
quickly, sorry, if you didn't catch Lee's website, just go down to the show notes of this episode. Her website, there's a link right there, so you guys can jump straight over.
Excellent. We want to thank, you can roll up, Mel. We want to thank McLennan Real Estate, Century 21, one of our fine sponsors. We had Matt in here a couple of weeks ago. He said, don't worry about a real estate bubble. Things are leveling off, but he doesn't see a crash coming. I want to thank AFC Urgent Care in Methuen and in North Andover, Marsan and Son Construction, EIS Investigation and Gun Trading, Borelli's Deli. You got my hot sausages. We were at all kinds of cookouts over the last week, and I always show up with hot sausages because you can't rely on other people to have hot sausages at their barbecues. I want to thank Tomo and Shaken Seafood. Clear Path for Veterans New England. They've been waiting for Jeff to get to them and go visit them. They help homeless veterans. They're at Devon's, and I think they're a little upset that they feel like they've been ignored. So you can carry that back.
Yep.
Clear Path for Veterans New England. Free shout out to Sullivan Insurance and our buddies at Lazy River Products in Drake. If all this summer heat is getting you down, if you're all upset about Roe v. Wade's taking away your rights, go to Lazy River Products and Drake it. Get some of their cannabis. Everything's going to be okay. Sounds like Melvin Taylor says we got to go home. He did, so go home already. Thank you, Christy. Great job today.
The views and opinions expressed by the hosts, guests, or callers of this program do not necessarily reflect the opinions of the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe, the United Podcast Network, its partners, or affiliates.